For years, I believed that to build a winning team, you had to be the loudest voice in the gym, that discipline comes from yelling, and that accountability comes from fear, i.e., running lines until you puke your guts out, and that punishment is the best motivator. But let me ask you this: how many athletes have actually played better because they were scared? How many teams have actually reached their full potential because they were constantly afraid of making a mistake? And the truth is, the best programs are not built on fear. They're built on trust, accountability, and leadership. And today I'm breaking down how I built a championship culture, 4 state titles in 4 years without yelling, fear, or punishment, and how you can steal these strategies for your own team. If I haven't met you, I am Coach Bre. I am a mental performance coach for athletes, but also a longtime head volleyball coach and the podcast host for Coach Her Game. This podcast is for you if you are a coach looking to elevate your game, build a culture that you are proud of, and you care about coaching your athletes beyond just the X's and O's. This space is for you. So today I'm breaking down the 4 state titles in 4 years. Now, a lot goes into this, and it was a culmination of a lot of things, but to sustain that type of culture and that type of success over 4 straight years, there were some common themes that I can trace back to seeing as an integral part to our success. Yes, we had talented teams. Before your mind goes there, you're like, well, she had this person and she had that person. Yeah, I've got talented teams, and I'm willing to bet that you do too. But there are things that those talented teams, once they get to the postseason and they get to state, all teams are like that. All teams are talented. All teams are going to give you a run for your money. And that's really where your culture, where your communication, where your mental training, all of those things really do shine through in those key moments. So I'm distilling it down to 3, but honestly, there's so much. It also takes a little bit of luck to be able to sustain that level of success over those 4 years. So I'm not overlooking luck and talent and all of those other things that go into it. But let's talk about kind of the basis for building this culture where players can really feel like they belong and that they thrive. The number one thing is to set the standard and then hold it. Setting the standard is the easy part. For me, the holding is the hard part. Okay, because we know a strong culture isn't just about rules, it's about standards. And the difference is that rules tell players what not to do. Standards show them who they are and what's expected of them at all times. And we develop standards in our program really early on. And we work on this through the summer. We also have had standards in our program that have been carried on from year after year. So the work of our leadership team in the summer creates and refines what our standard is, what our vision is, what gaps are existing from the previous year, and how can we fill those gaps. So we have these systems in place. And the more that you listen to this podcast and you check out our YouTube channel, I break down our leadership system and how we develop our standards and how our leaders actually are the ones that are enforcing these things. I give you all those strategies, throughout these episodes and in our YouTube channel. But the key thing is that those standards are developed, and they're not just words on a wall. They're not just plastered on the whiteboard. They're things that are enforced and they're celebrated throughout your program. And accountability, this word comes in that players should be holding themselves accountable and holding each other accountable. And accountability is not the same thing as punishment, right? Punishment is about control. Punishment is like, you forgot your black practice shirt today. So, the whole program is going to run. Now, I'm not here to say whether I agree with that or not. I will say that exercise as punishment is not something that we do a lot in our program. We'll from time to time have, a set of lines, but we are not, kind of how I was coached was like anything that you did wrong, you were running for it, and you were running for a long time, and we were spending a lot of practice doing a lot of that. I think that takes away from opportunities to get reps. And, there's other ways that we can be holding players accountable, one of which is having a conversation with the player, or having one of your leaders have a conversation with the player, figuring out what the root cause is. What is stopping you from making sure that you are set up for success for practice so that you're prepared, all of those type of things that, again, we'll be breaking down on our YouTube channel and other episodes is way more effective than just this blanket, we're just going to throw some punishments at you, because punishments work in the short term. but it kills long-term buy-in and long-term trust. Okay, it creates robot players who are afraid to take risk, especially if you're punishing players for missing their serves or making mistakes. It's actually not like helping them with the skill. It's making them afraid of making more mistakes. And it forces compliance, but doesn't build accountability. So to set standards that actually stick, it's really important that you're defining your program's non-negotiables. What do you want your team to be known for? What do you stand for as a program? Okay. Involve your players in this process. I cannot overemphasize them enough. It's messy, and sometimes it's like kind of annoying to, go around like, okay, can we just land on something? It'd be easier if I just told you, but it's so important that they are part of this process and they're picking what your standards are. In our program, we have our standards as attitude, effort, unity, and integrity, and we reinforce these things. So the player of the week, we have a weekly theme around one of those. The player of the week at the end of the week is chosen based on those demonstration of one of those standards, whatever the one is that we're focusing on for that week. When we do film or we point out plays or things that like good things that have happened, we're highlighting and tying it back to one of those standards. And so there's ways that you're infusing these things, and it's not just something that you talk about. As a coach, I tell stories around these standards as well, like very short little things to help connect these back to like what this looks like in real life. We've also had challenges for athletes where they're, challenged to do these things outside of volleyball. So they need to go up to the custodian at lunch and ask custodian if they need help with anything, and to reflect back our standard of integrity. And so there's things like that you can be constantly infusing in. Okay, this is not going to be a deep dive into all this. I'll just preface that, but just at a wider lens here, set the standard, hold the standard. What are the things that athletes need to be accountable to, and what happens if they are not? And part of our leadership structure, which I'll talk about in a second, actually helps run that by itself in a way. So I'll talk about that because that's honestly the best. When they're when they're met with a conversation from one of their peers around like, hey, I'm noticing that you are late to practice. What can I do to help you not be late to practice? In our gym, we are all here on time. Like that is actually going to go a lot further for that athlete who is late than me just lining everybody up and having them run a set of lines. Okay, number 2, you cannot neglect coaching the mental game. Now, obviously, this is important to me. You're like, I'm a mental performance coach. I went back 5 years in my coaching career because we did not do this at all. Because honestly, like we're not taught this as coaches. We're not told at all how to teach this part of the game, like one of the most important parts of the game, right? Because you can have your players playing really well in practice, and then all of a sudden in a game, you're like, is this a different team? Like, what the heck is happening? So you have to take this upon yourself to make sure that you at least know the basics. You do not need a sports psychology degree to teach this. And in fact, you don't even need to teach it. We have a plug and play system where you can literally plug and play mental training for your team in as little as 30 minutes or less a week. So if you want to check that out, go to coach.elitecompetitor.com/training. I'll put that in the show notes. That little training, you can actually go there. You can learn about our method, learn about plug and play, and there's a discount as well for that. Okay, super affordable for most programs to be able to incorporate just like a plug and play way. But mental training has to be part of your culture. Like you cannot just tell your athletes to be confident or shake it off and expect that they know how to do that. Like they do not. Right? They need mental tools as much as they need physical ones. And a strong mindset is honestly the difference between teams that crumble in big moments and a team that rises under pressure. And I've seen this time and time again. Okay. I've had teams that are very talented and we don't teach mental skills, and, we're looking pretty good, rolling along, beating people. And then all of a sudden we get hit with some pressure, some competition, and we don't know how to handle it. And we crumble, we fall apart, and then we don't make it state. Okay. And then I have had teams where, we've had this ingrained. We teach athletes a reset routine called the snapback routine to help players get over mistakes quickly. We teach them breathing techniques for pressure situations. We teach them what to do with their negative self-talk and how to turn that around. We teach visualization. We make it normal. Like it's literally a part of our daily routine to do mental training. It takes 5 minutes a day. And when we incorporate this, it shows up in big moments. I'll never forget this past state championship, this past fall, our 4th one. We weren't slated to win. We were kind of the underdogs. We got to the championship, which for many people, including myself, was a little surprising. So we were like, we're just happy to be here. But, the team across the net was bigger, stronger, and faster. We obviously had our talent as well. But I only had one returner who had been part of the previous 3 state championships. A lot of players were in new positions, key positions, libero, setter, like really key positions. I had young players on the court who had no state championship experience. You look across the court, you've got 6'1", 6'2", 6'3", D1 commit, D1 commit, where you're like, okay, we'll just line us up and you can do the eye test to see what's going to happen here. But, and at one point in that match, the other team that we were playing for the championship had championship point. So it was in the 4th set. They were serving the ball. They were set up to win. If they won that point, they won the whole thing. They hadn't won state since 1988, 36 years. So all their fans were on their feet. If there were any moment that was full of pressure, that this would be it. Okay. And so we actually won that point. So they served, we passed the ball, won the point. We go back, we get the ball. You got to win by 2. So that tied the game up, and we have to win by 2. So these next 2 points are up for grabs. And my sophomore goes back. Sophomore, no state experience, first year on varsity. And I'm like, okay, here we go. She goes out there. She looks like she has ice in her veins. She serves. The other team actually, their star hitter, hits the ball out of bounds, which is super unlikely, uncommon, especially for this level of play and this level of player. We're like, okay, we'll take it. Sophomore goes back, serves again. This is to win the set. And their team sends a free ball, a really easy ball into the net, made another unforced error. I had never seen this so blatant of a team literally just mentally falling apart on the other side of the net, and our team rising to that challenge. And we ended up winning the 5th set, winning state. Okay, at that point, it was kind of they kind of had the wind sucked out of their sails. And what I was most proud of though is, reporters were asking my players questions, and I was reading the paper and what they said. And one of the questions was about well, what were you thinking? When you went back to serve for that? And my player said, I was doing my breath and I was doing my reset word. I kept doing it, doing my breath, my reset word. And those things are part of the snapback routine that we teach with mental training every single day. They did their breath, they did their reset word every single day. And that is what she said out loud was what she was doing. And at my postseason meeting with her as well, she was like, I just was doing my breath and doing my reset word. That's all I knew how to do. And she was like, and that helped me. So it's in those moments where that mental training shines through. You cannot neglect it. You can't just say, I don't know how to do it, because I literally can give you a program that is plug and play for you to do it. So check out that training if you are yeah, okay, I need to start, incorporating some of this. So that's at coach.elitecompetitor.com/training. Okay. All right. Point 3, creating a culture where players belong and can be themselves. Again, I know this is a big one too. It's we're talking about these big things, but you already know the best teams aren't just teams. They have this deep connection to one another, and the strongest cultures create a space where every player feels like they belong. And I'll be honest, I don't always get this right. We have had to work really hard at this. And it wasn't like this at the beginning of my coaching career. In fact, I had a player quit. At this point is several years. Well, not several. It was 3 years ago at this point. And that gutted me. I was like, this has never happened. What the heck? And I could blame her for a lot of things, right? There's always kind of 2 sides to all of it, or 3 sides, right? But I had to really look at myself and my culture and realize that there were things that obviously were happening that either I wasn't aware of, things that I was allowing in our culture where this player did not feel like she wanted to return. And we know that when athletes feel safe, they perform better. When they are connected to their coaches and to other teammates, they can trust each other. They have better communication, better accountability. And players who buy into their team's mission are going to play harder. And so what I ended up doing after that player quit, coming back to, the following season afterwards, we started implementing something called the open circle method. And at least once a week, we create this atmosphere where players are sharing and they're connecting. Now, I have a whole structure and a whole framework for that. That's over on our YouTube channel. But basically, it's something that we do once a week as a team. It's I guess you could call it a glorified team meeting, but we have specific talking points, specific norms that go around this. And it has really nothing to do with volleyball and everything to do with trust and with sharing, with a little bit of vulnerability, which is hard for me as well as a coach. But I'll tell you what, it makes a huge difference in athletes trusting each other when they know each other. When you know somebody, you can trust them. When you trust them, you're going to play harder for them. You're going to feel more safe. Okay. So there's a lot that goes into that, but not just that team meeting, but we then started implementing weekly meetings with our players as well, like check-in meetings where we go through and we're making sure that we're tracking, that they're understanding their role. There's a lot that goes into that as well. We do daily meetings. I know this might sound a lot. You're like, how do you tell all these meetings? Okay. Over on our YouTube channel, I talk about my 10-second daily check-in with athletes. So you can steal that strategy. Weekly meeting, they're just on a cadence. And we make it happen because it's important, and athletes they love them and they want to make sure that they're communicating with their coaches. It provides an opportunity for that. And those weekly meetings are just part of our culture. They're part of our Fridays. So those things allow for more of a culture where people are sharing more than just their sport because it impacts the results. I can't emphasize it enough that whenever I think about taking it out, I'm like, oh, we need this time to do this. I'm like, you know what? This is just as important. All right. The other thing about it is empowering your leaders. As I said, I have a whole leadership structure that starts in the summer. And one of them is to identify leaders and put them in charge of different parts of your team. So, we have squad leaders. They have 5 to 6 people that they're in charge of. They have, they're the point of contact for those players, but they also are leading them in, getting them acclimated to the culture of the program. There's a lot that the squad leaders do for their teams, but it also allows them to be leaders and also be the people who are holding those people accountable. So it's often the squad leader, if somebody in their squad is not following an expectation or, didn't do something that they were supposed to do, their squad leader is often one that is the one holding them accountable. So, that is another key thing. It's really helping your leaders identify their strengths as well, and not expecting your leaders to all have the same strengths. So there's also a lot that goes into that, but when you can empower your leaders and you can create a culture where people feel like they belong and they have a role, good things happen. All right, the last thing is a little bonus. Compete. Make everything competitive. Be strategic and intentional with your practice planning so that there's limited transition times and that your athletes are competing. We use a competitive cauldron to track things and make sure that we are competing every single day, because when we do have a culture of competition, athletes are pushing each other more. We track, like I said, we track things. We rank players. I know that I can create a whole episode on ranking players because that can be tricky. You have to do that in a very intentional way. But we also make it fun. Players want to win in practice as much as they win in games, which makes it easy to have practices like that where we're not having okay, you're going to run a set of lines because you missed this many serves. It's like, no, we're battling it out in practice and make everything game-like so that it looks as much like competition in games as it can be. So these lessons, I could go further and further into all of this, but if I really were to distill it down, set the standard and hold it. Do not neglect coaching the outside of the game. Create a culture where players belong and can be themselves, including developing your leaders. And then a bonus, make sure everything is competitive, game-like, and create a system where players want to come and they want to battle it out and they want to compete. They want to play for each other. Okay. All right. If you take nothing else from this episode, though, remember this: you do not have to yell. You do not have to intimidate or punish your players to build a championship culture. You've got to set the standard. You've got to build confidence, and you've got to create leaders. All right. If this resonated with you, subscribe, share it with another coach who needs to hear it. And in the next episode, I am going to dive into something that I honestly wasn't sure if I was going to create an episode around, but I decided I would. And that is all about how to balance this role of being a mom, being a coach, being, in your life while also coaching, and how to juggle it all, because I was at the brink of burnout recently. And I'll tell you how I came back from that and what I learned in the process. I'll see you in the next episode.